Well, the one thing I've always learned in fishing these big, expansive southern reservoirs, especially the ones with the wood and stuff, that have a lot of open water and big water, is that no matter what time of year the spawn is supposed to occur, maybe from January all the way to June, it's always happening through that whole cycle. And really what I like to look for is, yeah, first thing in the year, you want to go way back in the creeks, way back up in the shallow stuffs, but later in the year, and like my 2017 win on this very reservoir, way out they were spawning later in the year. And that was a key for me, figuring out that there's always spawning fish. So there's always pre-spawn fish, there's always fish spawning, and there's always some post-spawn fish. So what I like are these long tapering reefs that sort of have little rises and falls in that, you know, anywhere from 2 to 10 feet of water. And those are perfect highways for those fish, those later fish, to sort of shoot up, spawn on that 2 or 4 foot flat, and then just back right off. And they'll have all 3 phases of fish on these type of places, because you know, those ones are moving up, they're gonna stage just outside, and then when they're done spawning, they come straight out to those same spots before they go out in their deep water. So I love fishing a bait. I'll take a fairly shallow running crankbait. This is one that worked last year, and throw it as far as I can. And basically, it's gonna land in about 4 or 5 feet of water. I wanna burn that thing across as fast as I can, bumping off the stumps, bumping off the rocks and everything else. And then usually right when it clears, there's a little break right here. When it clears, that break is where you're gonna catch that fish. He's gonna be sitting right off that little break in the morning. I love the crankbait for a lot of reasons. One reason particularly that I like a white crankbait, is a lot of these lakes are full of little white bass. And some lakes are full of bluegill, some lakes are full of whatever's in there, but match what is living in that lake. I like a white crankbait on a lake like this because there's a lot of white bass running these shoals too, and those bass can't stand them. They're always spitting up baby white bass. A lot of times, a lot of places you'll go, it'll be crawdads. Maybe the crawdad hatches come out, and there's a lot of crawdads. You might have to change your patterns to the reds or the oranges, but sort of match what you find in your lakes to catching those spawning fish year round. And that's what I love to do. Picture in your mind there's fish spawning up on this flat. Maybe there's a few beds, maybe there's a few pre-spawners out here, maybe there's a couple post-spawners even further out. And that's really gonna help you slow down a fish. And once I locate them with this fast-moving lure, then I might slow down and try some other finesse techniques. When I won the 2017 Toledo Bass Elite Series here, I was using a specific rod and reel just for it. I was using a fairly fast 6/8-to-1 Lew's Custom Pro reel and a David Fritz glass cranking rod. And the glass cranking rod is very important. When you have fish either protecting or pre-spawn, a lot of times they're just not hitting it well. If you use a very stiff rod or use a heavy graphite rod, a lot of times you're just gonna miss those fish. With this glass rod, so forgiving, it's a perfect way to catch them. I did put fluorocarbon line. This is 14-pound Lew's fluorocarbon line on. I do like that because I like to know the bottom content. You can tell when you hit a rock or stump, or you come from the clay into the rock, you can tell even with a glass rod with this fluorocarbon line. So I do like that. But the key to that is get a good long rod, something you can get that distance out there. You don't want to be near them. You want to stay back. And then keep that bait moving and bouncing off those stumps, bouncing off that bottom, glancing. You want a reaction strike more than anything else. That's what I'm looking for. One thing I love about my Lew's is it's got the palmer handle. So instead of a normal pistol grip where I'd hold it here, I can get my whole hand over it and have that leverage to hold that rod as I'm burning that bait through the bottom. And if I hit a stump, I hit the bottom, I got the leverage still because I got my whole hand over it. My fingers aren't spread out over that. These flats are just too big to sit out here with a worm or a jig and drag. You do want to use some sort of crankbait. You can cover some water, catch all 3 phases of those spawning fish.